Good morning, and welcome to Connections Radio Show, where we talk about ideas that matter. The goal of Connections Radio Show is to explore a wide range of topics that challenge us to see ourselves, our community, and the world around us in ways that get us thinking, get us feeling, get us imagining, and get us connected. So our show today will feature our Connections community partner, the Reviving the Islamic Sisterhood for Empowerment, called RISE. And my co-host is the Advocacy Director, Asma Mohammed. And we also have Farheen Hassan, who is a school board candidate for ISD 719 in the Prior Lake and Savage area. Welcome. Hello.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here, Laurie.
Hi.
Hi, I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you for having me, Laurie.
Oh, I love having you.
Thank you for having me, Laurie.
Oh, this is great. This is great. So we're going to be talking about education. We're going to be talking about school board. We're going to be talking about all kinds of cool things. So, Asma, how have you been?
Oh, it has been a pandemic.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've been good, though. I mean, one thing that I've been trying to remind myself is that it's an election year and we can't relax during this.
Mm-hmm.
November is coming up really quickly, and I think people are forgetting that we're less than 60 days away from the next biggest election of our lifetime. And I think a lot of us assume that 2016 was the biggest election of our lifetime, but this November is going to be crucial, especially as we look at local races. So as we talk to Farheen, I want us to focus on how local races can impact the work that we do. So it's been one of the craziest years of my life, but it has also been extremely rewarding. And I think I've learned a lot about the importance of staying involved, even when a lot of us feel really disconnected.
It's more than a wake-up call. You know, this has been week by week. I think to myself, okay, it can't get that much worse, can it? It's like, yeah, it can.
I know, that's exactly what I've been thinking. Like, what more could happen at this point?
We've
and
got
it's like, well, the census could be they could try to shut the census down.
Well, they're shutting it down the end of September, though. You know,
right?
So they are. I mean, it's crazy stuff. I mean, we've got the plague. We've got, you know, our vote being in question is whether or not we can, you know, that we're going to get stopped by either postage or lack of access. And
exactly.
But,
I mean,
but people
are so many things.
But people are reacting. Last in 2016, what made me upset in 2016 the most was like, I don't think I'm going to vote. I don't know if it really matters. I'm really not. And I'm like, no, voting matters. I think everyone gets that voting matters now.
God, I hope so. I mean, I've been hearing some mixed responses from people. I mean, because I've been doing some kind of like just general canvassing in our community. And there are some people who are really excited and saying we need to change the status quo. And there are others who are saying there is no way to change the status quo. So what's the point?
Yeah, I get,
and
I worry about that when we go into
to,
depression, you know, it's like.
Exactly. And I need those people to not be complacent because things are still really bad and they could get worse.
Yes. But what gives us hope is being able to have good local people. And I'm excited about our show today and having Farheen share more about her views on education.
Yes.
So Farheen, tell me about local schools and responding to COVID-19. What's up with that? What's going on?
Well, I mean, I thank you again, Laurie, for having me, and great to hear from you, Asma, as well. I think what there's obviously been a huge shift as far as, you know, instruction and education is concerned, right? And then we also have to remember as far as the education gap and, you know, the disparities for the students of color is concerned, kids learn very differently, you know, when they are not in the school community or the school environment classes. Right, online classes cannot give us the honest experience and, you know, provide us meaningful experiences and with interaction with other children from different ethnicities, with like children of color. And then also we have to remember how children sort of bond with each other. They bond with each other while eating, hanging out, listening to music, sharing their cultural experiences with each other. And those interactions cannot, you cannot have those authentic interactions online. So there's a huge shift with COVID, especially those who have opted for, social distance learning. And then we also have to sort of keep in mind that with distance learning, there are children, there are communities that don't have access to internet or, would face technical difficulties. And then also to remember that, there would be situations, especially with elementary school children, where at least one parent needs to be present with the child during instruction times. So those are also impacting our children as they continue the school year.
Do you feel like there are really good plans in place, or do you feel like people are just kind of, flying by the seat of our pants and figuring it out day by day? I mean, does there seem to be direction in the school area that you're working with, or is there a lot of fears? What's some of the emotional stuff going on in the stories that are happening?
I would say, Laurie, that obviously there is fear, right?
Yeah.
And I think we're trying to sort of do the best that we can right now at this moment. Because, I mean, again, they're different, the information that we're getting from the government, and then for us to try to do the best that we can. And then also, we have to keep in mind that the pandemic also brings a lot of emotional anxiety, within the realm of education, right, with children. So I think what we're trying to do the best that we can. I also become concerned for teachers and staff who do not have the option of sort of not being at school or not. I mean, because there are certain schools who have basically said, well, we have to have an in-person instruction or otherwise do the hybrid program. You still have exposure to the pandemic. And so we're basically just trying to sort of figure out what works best for the community.
And I'd have to believe that would impact their ease and comfort in teaching, that they're dealing with that anxiety. I mean, there's just so many changes that are going on all at once. And kids can pick that up. They can pick up anxiety. They do a lot of modeling. They try and take in all their surroundings and figure out how to make sense out of the world. And when parents and teachers in the community are having a hard time making sense, I'm sure it makes it doubly hard on kids to figure out how do they fit in. What does this look like now? This is different than last year. So what? And parents, how do parents, when they're working with kids in home, be able to do their work as well as work with kids?
Yeah.
Do you have?
This is Asma. I've been talking to a lot of teachers, and there are so many of them that are terrified right now because they're like, I want to be there for my kids, and I also need to stay healthy. So what am I going to do? It's just a scary time.
Well, we never expected to ask teachers to be frontline, in a war, and we're having this war of pandemic that really puts them, their health and well-being on the line. I mean, I'm sure that I've seen so many interviews with teachers that are like, I love my kids, but I got to stay alive, and I need to be there for my family.
And I would be so scared right now to be going to school, and I'm sure that Farheen, so many people in your district are feeling the same. I think all over the country, people are wondering, what can I do right now to take care of myself and to take care of my kids?
What does this?
Right. And I think it's just so. It's just so interesting because you also come from a place where you want to be there for the children, and you want to educate them, and that human interaction is not there online. But then obviously with the fear of how are things going to be, and again, we don't really have the direction of, well, where is the pandemic going? Is it subsiding? Is it all of this? There's so many unknown during this time right now, that is definitely affecting all of us in a multitude of ways.
You mentioned earlier about kids learning in different ways and learning, socializing with each other in terms of, getting to know each other with eating and breaks and whatnot. But I think they also learn really differently. Some kids really learn through physical and need to move around and need to have that kinesthetic opportunity to learn. Some kids learn, are very easily visually, others orally, and, the full experience, through a computer. I can't imagine that it completely can integrate all the different ways kids learn. Now, maybe we'll explore, more ways that we can use our technology. But even playing ball games out on the playground, there's things that you learn about cooperation and socializing and how do you deal with conflict. Those things aren't going to happen with a computer, and maybe it's just a matter of seeing this as a segue until either next year or maybe even the year after. I'm hearing folks say that, even if we were to get a vaccine by the end of this year, it would take a full year for us to get back to the kind of interactions.
Normal.
Well, I try to avoid using the word normal because I don't believe we will have anything close to what we have considered normal. It's like, what's the daily normal? I mean, normal is like revealed to me every day. There's no pattern anymore. But yeah, I hope that we can keep looking at making sure that kids are having a full experience, even if they're connected by computer.
Yeah, and Laurie, I would also say that I think we're just I've also heard parent struggles where the parent is so concerned and does not want to send their child to school, but the child is basically sort of against the whole online learning and wants to be at school with their peers. So I think there's struggles at home as well that are taking place because there's anxiety for the parents. But then as far as the children are concerned, they really want to be with their friends. They really want to still have that experience, that school experience and being with friends, having lunch together, having those social interactions with them.
And certain and certain families have more multi-generational within their home. So it puts them more at risk for having kids go to school when there is multi-generational.
Yep.
And there are a lot of different cultures that have a much more extended multi-generational celebration in their home. And it puts that family at more risk, even when the kids do want to go, bringing back, because they may be healthy, but they may impact the elderly within the home.
Yeah, it's scary right now. I was talking to a student just yesterday who's a freshman now in high school, and I was asking him how his year was going, and I was like, is it crazy? And he said, honestly, I hate it. and he said he wants to cry every day because it's just so much harder. He's like, there's more work and there's less support. And I know that teachers are feeling that too. Like, if you're a good teacher, you care about what your students feel when they're saying, I don't have the support I need. But imagine doing that for 120 kids all online.
The other thing.
So even as a teacher, not being able to support your kids in the way that they need to be supported is really difficult.
The other thing that worries me is that there's a lot of kids out there that rely on the school lunches. And and so you're dealing with, not only should your kid go to school because you want them to get the full education, but you may need the services that the school provides as well. And that's tough. How do you make those kind of life and death decisions and coping decisions? It's a complicated navigation. And the questions aren't simple, and the questions lead to more questions more often than not.
Definitely. And I know that some school districts are doing a little bit better about that than others. Some are offering, pickup, social distance pickup. I know that Representative Ilhan Omar worked on including the Meals Act in the big COVID package. And so there are districts that are doing that, and is support for schools that wish to include that, but not every school has the capacity, and not every parent or guardian or student have a way to get to school without a bus. And so there are so many barriers to getting our kids fed, and our kids can't learn when they're hungry.
Right, right. Well, I think
Right.
this also brings up, we were talking about teachers a little bit ago, how important it is to have empathy and understanding of the complexities of the families. And I think one of the ways that you get a better empathy and understanding is having more teachers of color and who have more cultural awareness and cultural connections to their students.
Yes.
And let's save that for next segment. We're coming up here at the end of this first segment. But I think that is a really interesting topic to explore. How do we persuade more teachers of color during a time when they would be at more risk as well? And we need more support, but we also need to be sensitive to the various risks, because we know that there's a disparity of how the pandemic is impacting health-wise communities of color. So makes it even more complicated, but even more important as well. So stay with us. We'll be continuing our conversation with the Reviving the Islamic Sisterhood for Empowerment, a wonderful group that I absolutely adore that partner with me on these shows. And we'll be talking more about what do we do? How do we help? How do we support? How do we stay connected and be there for the kids and education? Welcome back to Connections Radio. I'm Laurie Fitz. We're talking about ideas that matter, and I'm glad you've made the conversation and made the connection. So today we are with our community connection partner, Reviving the Islamic Sisterhood for Empowerment, RISE Group. And my co-hosts are both the advocacy director, Asma Mohammed, and one of their board members, Farheen Hassan, who is a school board candidate for ISD 719 in Prior Lake and Savage. Welcome. Oh, I also want to mention, today the show is sponsored by Clockwork, wonderful group that supports your wonderful organization. So welcome.
Thank you, Laurie. Happy to be here.
So we were talking about teachers and representation. Talk to me about your feelings about what do we need to do to help make sure that we're creating a good cultural environment for all our students.
Well, Farheen, I'll let you go in a second. I just wanted to frame the conversation with saying that in Minnesota there are 4%. So 4% of teachers in Minnesota are teachers of color. 4%. And I want you to let that sink in. And imagine how many schools you know of, how many school districts you know of, how many students you know that could use extra support from a teacher of color, just having a teacher that looks like them in the classroom, and know that that's not there for so many. And that the problem isn't really that teachers of color aren't applying. The problem is that school districts aren't hiring teachers of color, and that this isn't being incentivized at all for teachers of color. There are other states that teachers of color move to because it's easier to access those schools. And because so many white teachers are tenured in our school districts, it's harder for those teachers of color to get in.
And I can imagine a student with having a role model that looks like them, person of authority, person of insight.
Yeah.
That would give so much to all of our students, but particularly.
My first teacher of color was a Black woman when I was a junior in high school. And she changed my life. She's still in my life. She's still my mentor. So thinking about that was however many, like a dozen years, 11 years ago.
Tell me what she did that helped connect with you.
She didn't automatically assume that I was going to be trouble.
Yeah. And
I think that just thinking that was that she had my back,
right,
that she was there to support me, and she didn't think that Asma was going to be a problem. And that's the feeling that I got in so many classrooms I walked in, regardless of the fact that I was an AP honors, like high flying student.
Mm-hmm.
That was the assumption that was made about me. I was kicked out of class for asking a question. I was kicked out of class for looking at my friend. And when, there were white students doing the same thing. And so even thinking about this as teachers of color are trying to get into the scene, they are being told that they aren't qualified for whatever reason. A lot of teachers of color that I know had to start out as paraprofessionals or had to start out in some kind of administrative capacity before they were hired on as teachers. And it took them years to get in. And that's not the same case for our white teachers. So there is a discrepancy. There is clear bias in the way that schools are hiring teachers. And that bias actually bleeds into how those teachers are teaching students of color and into the opportunity gap that exists between students of color and white students.
It's part of looking at the whole system, right? People can go, oh, I'm not a racist. But our system is set up so that we are not creating equality as an ongoing assumption. There are too many obstacles.
Our system is set up to for a lot of our students to fail, and oftentimes those are our Black and brown students. Minneapolis has the second highest opportunity gap in the country between Black and white students, second highest. And half of Minneapolis doesn't even know that. So when I was teaching in Minneapolis, I had to go into a classroom knowing that 50% of my kids were not going to graduate because the graduation rate at that time was 54%. And then slowly it got better. But just knowing that my kids weren't being supported in school was hard. That I was the only hijabi educator that they probably would ever have in their lifetimes. The only Muslim, the only brown woman who would be their educator. And that I had to do even more work to make sure that they felt supported because I was going to be the only one. That was hard.
And if you can imagine you being an AP student, and doing very well scholastically,
mm-hmm.
and yet you felt going into a classroom that folks looked at you with like, oh, you're going to be trouble.
Mm-hmm.
When you put that label on anyone, at what point do you just get depressed and there's almost a learned depression of, okay, well, that's the label. And what incentive then do you have to become more than who you are and aspire and to have, to be treated with, the respect and encouragement rather than the enemies coming in the room? That's just, I find heartbreaking.
It is, and it's the reality for so many of our students. It's heartbreaking.
And I would say, and I would say I think that is the reason why we need to have people of color in leadership positions, because you need to see them in those roles and then to actually make those changes that are needed in our schools. For the children. My experience, I'm a Montessori teacher, and I think when I look back and try to remember why I am really running for school board, it would have to be the one child, especially that one child. She was about 7 or 8 years old in second grade. When she had me in her classroom, I was a long-term sub. She literally was with me the whole week, held my hand whenever possible, and she just kept saying, we are the same. You look like me. And she would go around telling her friends, the teacher, Miss Farheen, is just like me because I wore a hijab and she wore a hijab. So to see that representation and to see that she's not the only one, and also to see that, somebody can wear a hijab and be the teacher of the classroom and have to give her that space and that comfort. When I think back to why I run, I really am running for that child, and for children like her, who need that representation. I'll also have to say my school district has 10% diversity. We're almost 90% Caucasian community. And so who is representing those 10% of children, right? My daughter, so I have three daughters, and my oldest one is the only one who actually went to the school district. She did that for the first 4 years. But she just, for her, she kept saying, nobody understands me. In the beginning, she would take our cultural foods for lunch. And then slowly and gradually, she just said, well, Mom, can I just have peanut butter sandwiches? And I couldn't understand why, because I was like, well, you love kebab sandwiches. I don't understand. And she was like, no, because otherwise, children look at me and they say it smells funny, or, oh, what are you eating? What is that? Or just being comfortable with who she is. That sort of made me pivot and say, okay, fine, well, we need to figure out a way to make sure that she is comfortable with being herself. So we moved her out of district. But I would say not all parents have the luxury and the ability to do that. So that is where we need, as we need people of color in those positions where we can actually hold other teachers accountable, our administration accountable, and to invite teachers of color to be in those spaces, to have the representation for the children.
When you talk about that,
sorry, that's
I
become very passionate about.
That's exactly why we want you on the show. You speak from the heart and you speak truth. All those things are so important. And when you talk about that child, I can visualize her having that joyful face, that sense of pride, that sense of, it is heartwarming to consider that child feeling that sense of what Asma had shared about her junior year in high school teacher. That kind of joy they deserve. Our children deserve. And not only does she look like you, but how wonderful for those children to get to know you. And so that they feel the comfort and joy in your leadership, that many leadership faces need to be displayed and supported to truly create the multicultural community that we can aspire to, where leadership is something in your soul, when you have purpose and when you want to have when you want to support a community and serve a community, how beautiful that is, that anyone can step to the table and take the leadership role, and that we support and honor, acknowledge. But it needs to start with children recognizing leadership, and when we don't have that, it becomes part of the systemic culturalization of who has privilege and who doesn't.
Absolutely. And people like Farheen, right? Like, there are women of color who are stepping up right now and saying, enough is enough. Mm-hmm. This isn't just about my kid anymore. It's about every kid in this district who has felt like they didn't have a voice, who has felt like they couldn't share with their teachers. There are so many reasons why we need more women of color in leadership positions, but especially in our school boards, because there are decisions being made about our kids that do not involve us. And if we have folks like Farheen, stepping up, then we will have people who are really considering all of the nuances of being a parent of students of color and being an educator of color in this space, right? And saying, I know what's best for our students of color.
And with that, why don't we take a break and then come back and talk more about school boards? What do they do? People have heard of them, but do they really understand what kind of decisions get made and the role that school boards play and how important it is to have diverse leadership? So with that, we'll go to break, but we'll be back in just a few minutes and talking more about how you can make a difference and what we need to do to support people of color, both in leadership and teaching positions for our students. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Connections Radio. where we talk about ideas that matter. I'm glad you've made the connection and are joining us today. I'm Laurie Fitz, your host. And we have our Connections community partner, the Reviving the Islamic Sisterhood for Empowerment, RISE. And I have my co-host today. I have the Advocacy Director, Asma Mohammed. And I also have Farheen Hassan hosting with us today. And she is a school board candidate for ISD 719 in the Prior Lake and Savage area. We were just talking about school boards in our last segment. So what does a school board do?
That is a great question, Laurie. Okay, so the school board really is, it's teamwork, right? So there are individuals who come together and decide that they are going to hold the administration sort of accountable, right? They sort of advocate for the students, the staff, and the community. So they sort of take responsibility to create, the way I look at it is we're creating positive change for our children and for our community. That's really, so they're policymakers, so as far as I'm concerned, the way I look at it is I'm running to cultivate a culture of diversity, inclusion, and equity in schools, and also to inspire other people of color to run as well.
How has the campaigning been going for you?
It has, I'll be honest, it has been a struggle for me. This is my first time running. And I'm trying to figure out the best way to do this. Mm-hmm. So just trying to sort of connect with other individuals. I said that before as well. So we are, as far as our district is concerned, we have 1% of Black children in the school district, 5% Asian, 3% Hispanic, and about 88% Caucasian. So, I keep going back to, who is representing the children of color. And I'm trying to build that connection with our community and trying to sort of bring awareness where we need to be the voice of those children and others as well. I mean, I wouldn't sort of exclude our Caucasian community, but we have to sort of come together as a cohesive group that sort of has a vision mm-hmm. for the betterment of the community, right? So, I wouldn't say it's been going awesome. I'm sort of taking it one step at a time and just keep moving forward. I honestly wish that there was some sort of a manual, a handbook, sure. somebody who would just tell us exactly what we should be doing and what's the next step. That would be wonderful.
I've got another question for you. Let's vision that you are now on that school board and you've been elected. What's your vision? What would you love to see happen as your leadership role on the school board? What are some of the ways that you want to make an impact?
So I believe in, so as a Montessori teacher, I believe in sort of the idea of alternative learning, and then giving children the opportunities, for best education, providing them support and giving them resources, really being able to sort of hear them and listen to them, create an environment where there's dialogue, mm-hmm. right? So understand the concerns of the parents, really be there present for them, mm-hmm. and then be actively and authentically work together to bring improvement. Because every child has a different style. Every family is different, right? Mm-hmm. So how do we work together and provide the best for the families and for each student? So it's really working together. And then I would also say that I think, I have been getting questions of, well, what are you going to do as a board? We have to remember I, as an individual, cannot mm-hmm. really do anything because it is teamwork,
Right.
What I can do is I can influence other board members to come together. So that would be, so for me, I look at myself as somebody who is going to create those conversations, bring maybe those, conversations forward to the board and see how we can create change.
I also think you bring a lot of passion, and that passion is so needed to bring people together and think in new ways, to enlighten and to enliven conversation. And I believe it really is through really good conversation where people are open to figuring out solutions together. But we're moved by individuals who have a vision, and I believe you do have that, Farheen. I think you'd be such a gift to that team to think and imagine in new ways. And everyone wants to do what's right for kids. I mean, I just have to believe that. In your heart of hearts, everyone wants children to succeed. But I don't know if we've all had the opportunity to be exposed to so many different ways of looking at it. There's more than one way to educate. There's more than one way to lead, and how exciting it is to have the opportunity to learn. And I do wish you the very best. I think you would be a gift to that school board.
Thank you. I'm excited. Thank you.
Yes, yes. We went a little long in our second segment, so we've come to the end of this third segment. In the next segment, I'm looking forward to us talking about just how are we doing some good coping during this time, and good suggestions for the Connections audience to be thinking about. So stay with us. We'll be right back just after a few short commercials, and we'll talk about how to cope during these difficult times and how to support kids especially. Welcome back to Connections Radio Show. I'm Laurie Fitz, your host, and we have our Connections community partner, Reviving the Islamic Sisterhood for Empowerment, RISE, and I have our advocacy director, Asma Mohammed, who is the co-host, and I've got Farheen Hassan, who is the school board candidate. She's also serves on the board of RISE, but she is the school board candidate for ISD 719 in Prior Lake and Savage. We want to do a big thank you to Clockwork for supporting our show today. And Asma, would you share the RISE website? And then Farheen, I'd love to have you share, how, if people wanted to make a contribution and support you, how would they do that? So let's start first with the RISE website.
Yeah, so we are www.revivingsisterhood.org. We're also on Twitter as Rise Sisterhood or Instagram as Reviving Sisterhood, so you can check us out there. Always welcome for contributions, but right now I just want to highlight Farheen's campaign, and contributions are needed there. School board campaigns are not easy to run, so please give to Farheen.
And Farheen, how would we do that?
So I'm creating my website. It's called Farheen for PLSAS, so that would be F for Frank, ARHEEN, and then number 4. And then plsas.com. So please, that would be awesome. Thank you.
But and I think it's wonderful for all of our audience to be thinking about how to support women of color in leadership positions. So even if that's not your school district, supporting Farheen in her leadership may inspire others in other school districts. So do the right thing and support Farheen in her school board candidacy.
Yes, donate.
Yeah. So, we started off the show talking about the challenges that we're facing, and it's especially important to create a good, positive environment for kids. Do you both have some good suggestions for us to be thinking about in how we're coping with this change and what we can do best to support children?
It's a tough one, Laurie. One thing that I've been thinking about how to support our students is what I do with so I still have some students, and what I do is I check in with them really regularly outside of any educational setting. And so just asking them, how things are going. What I do is I call it a high or low. So I have my students share a high from their week and a low. It could be from the day if you're seeing your students every day, or if you're a parent or guardian and you want to know how your students are doing. Just ask for a high and a low. And usually that starts a conversation. And what I do is I actually share my own high and low, because when you're vulnerable with your students and you share something about yourself, they're more likely to share about themselves with you. So I'll actually share, like, it's been a really hard week because I am struggling with the thought of getting COVID because I'm in a classroom right now, right? Like, sharing that with your students is important because they're not feeling connected right now. And I think the biggest thing to do is help students feel like they know you, and asking questions, opening up conversations is one way to do that.
I think it's also important to know that if a child is acting out and being more angry, or there seems to just be more frustration in dealing with the child, to not just look at the behavior at the superficial level of just being angry and what do I do with this angry child, but really think through, what's triggering that? What are the fears? What's the pain?
Exactly.
How can you get underneath it? But you're not going to get underneath it with just, I know you're really hurting. That you almost sometimes need to back into it and open up the conversation so that they can eventually share.
Yes. And I think one way to do that is to be emotionally healthy yourself, and to be checking in with yourself, with your loved ones regularly. And having someone to vent to is so crucial right now.
Farheen, do you have some ideas as well?
Yeah, I do. Laurie, yeah. And Asma, that's so accurate. I mean, there's a lot of anxiety and, of the unknown right now during this pandemic. And obviously, and children react to that, and children see us sort of reacting to it, and they will emulate, and they will sort of take in those fears, right? And we don't have all the answers. The way I look at it is, every individual and every family will process this differently. We just have to come from a place of heart. We also have to remember that there are, our personalities. Just keep that in mind. So introverts right now are thriving and are really enjoying their space.
Yeah, it's true.
But extroverts, but extroverts are having a really, really hard time. So, we have to sort of be mindful of that. Just the temperaments and the personalities. So I'm a counseling student. I'm doing my master's in counseling right now. One thing that we constantly talk about in class is it's called SHIELD, SHIELD. So keeping SHIELD in mind
we've got about
really helps us.
We've got about a minute, so I just want to make sure you know that.
Okay. So I'll just quickly go by with SHIELD. Be mindful of your sleep. H is for like handling, how do you handle stress? So doing meditations, yoga, breathing. I is like being involved with others that bring you joy. So keep that in mind. E is exercising, maybe going out on a stroll, just, giving yourself some time being with nature. L is learning. And D is diet. So keep that in mind.
Oh, it's perfect. And
you process COVID.
I'm going to ask you to send me that so I can put it on my Facebook. That is a beautiful. We need to put our shield up. We need to be able to take care of ourselves so we can take care of others, and especially take care of children. Thank you. You all are doing beautiful work. Support Farheen. She's going to do wonderful. We're done.